Welcome to the Put on Waivers Media Group, home of the Put on Raiders podcast and the Student Body Right podcast. This is your place for the best breakdowns and the best insight for those who fight on and bleed silver and black. Now, here are your hosts, Dwayne Douglas and Ryan Holmes.
It should be interesting there. Anybody, before we go to like some other stuff in the draft, anybody in the undrafted free agent room that you like?
Yeah, well, we missed the offensive line here. Obviously, within the draft picks they had, they immediately went out and got Curtis, the UT Chattanooga guard, who has an opportunity to make the roster. And then obviously Wagner, they gave a big amount of money to. I think it was over $200,000, the right tackle out of Arkansas. So one of those two guys probably has an opportunity to make this roster. It's going to come down to, what are the pieces they want to put together? Are they going to go out in the free agency and add a veteran offensive lineman to this roster? Because they didn't address it in the draft. You can't really count on those two rookie free agents, but I think they are guys that can develop and make this team. Maybe one of them makes it this year, but they have an opportunity to get on the practice squad and play. I don't think they're long-term answers, but you can never have enough bodies along the offensive and defensive fronts on that practice squad.
Yeah, so it should be interesting there. Some other names like, Adam Plant from UNLV, defensive end, Jaden Grant for all the Pac-12 people from Oregon State, and they also I think there's a UCLA corner in there as well. Drake Thomas, a linebacker from NC State. Last year you shot your shot and you said, hey, the Seahawks had a great draft, and then we of course replayed that because they had a good draft. What's the one team that you kind of shined here where you thought had a really good draft?
I like what the Arizona Cardinals did, just from the aspect of they got the guy they wanted. They got the consensus number one offensive lineman, which is with a big area of need.
Yeah.
But they got Houston's first round pick next year. So if the Texans end up with a top 5 pick and Arizona's not any good, they're going to have 2 of the top 5 or 6 picks in the draft where they can go up and get Caleb Williams or Drake May. So they filled the biggest need on their roster, and they also got probably 2 cracks at the apple next year, 2 bites at the apple to get one of those 2 quarterbacks. So I don't know if I can say there's another team had a better draft than that. Yeah. Assuming Paris Johnson turns out to be a starting left tackle for 10 years in the league. Yeah. And there's a chance they can end up with the first and second pick next year. And they can trade off, the second pick and even recoup even more capital. Or they could take Marvin Harrison. Imagine if they got Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison by trading down from 3 to 6. So I don't even need to say what the rest of their draft was. Like, they won the draft, and they got another number 3 next year too. So they picked up a 1 and a 3, and the key being they got Houston's pick. I think Houston had another pick. They could have. I think it was Cleveland's
pick. Yeah.
But the fact that it was Houston's pick makes this. They're the winners of the draft, in my opinion. Just from that, because it doesn't matter what they owe Kyler Murray at that point. They'll trade him for pennies on a dollar if Caleb Williams is staring at him at number 1.
And that's crazy. And they're going to be in that category for Caleb Williams. I mean, because Caleb Williams, they're not going to rush Caleb Williams. I mean, they're going to rush what's his name back. Their quarterback back in Arizona. What are you rushing him back for? I mean, he's going to want to get on the field. According to rumors, that he almost got traded to Atlanta. So we'll see what happens as far as that goes. But Caleb Williams, Drake May, I mean, those guys are going to be right there. If you're a head coach, wouldn't you love to kind of reset it, and just keep stockpiling talent? Arizona's one of those states that doesn't have the state income tax, so another reason why. But I mean, that's if you're going to have a first year where you're going to lose, let it be this one, because they're set up beautifully for the future.
And if you're the Cardinals, you look at it this way: Kyler Murray is coming off an ACL injury. You don't have to rush him back. No. Like, you don't need to try to get him on the field by week 3 or 4. You can tell him, hey, take your time, get healthy. And when they start seeing that win-loss column go, 1-5, 1-6, 2-8, then they can be like, well, let's keep you healthy, because then he's a tradable asset at that point. So They should be able to get something back from him. Now, they're not going to go out and get first-round picks for him based on the contract, I don't think. Yeah. But if they start off slow, and who's their quarterback right now? Is it still Colt McCoy? Like, they drafted Clayton Tune, but at this point, they're in no rush to get Kyler Murray on the field, knowing that they're going to be sitting pretty going into next year.
I mean, it just makes all the it makes all the sense in the world if you're them. I mean, I would not play. I would not play that game. And I mean, you got. I mean, like it all sounds good. They went to Oklahoma, the owner and the head coach, when he got a statue built out there at the University of Oklahoma, whatever. But like when it comes to business, the NFL is notorious for moving on real quick. And if I was that head coach, I'd move on. I'd move on immediately if I could reset it with a new quarterback, as highly rated as the next draft class might be as far as that goes.
They're in a division where none of the teams have a long-term answer. The Rams don't have a long-term answer.
Niners.
The Seahawks don't, and the Niners don't, unless they really believe in Trey Lance. But he hasn't proven that yet.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And I'm not saying Brock Purdy. I'm not ready to stamp as long-term 8 to 10 year starter. I'm not going there.
Yeah, you're not. Everybody, a lot of people are. A lot of people are. I'm not either. So, real quick, Peter King got into the draft room for the first round. The Raiders were jumping up and down. That it looks like the first round. Look like Colt McCoy is there, and they drafted Clayton Tune as well too. Those are the quarterbacks out there in Arizona. So that has 2 wins written all over it.
So if we're 1-5 and it's week 8, you're coming off a bye. Are you putting Kyler Murray on the field?
It's gonna be hard to take him on. It's gonna be hard for him not to. I mean, would they trade him mid-season?
No, I don't think they traded him mid-season. But like you just make sure he's 100%. You know, the doctors get on board. Now, eventually, they're going to have to put him on the field, but they're in no rush to get him on the field.
Right? No, I mean, you put him on the field when you secured your situation, just so people who you want to sell them to actually know what they're going to get. So Peter King goes in the draft room, talked a lot of different things. I mean, he's, the first comment under his video was land the plane, Peter. But he told a story about how the Raiders did not believe in any of these quarterbacks. It's probably except for one, which was probably Bryce Young. I don't know if I go that far as far as these quarterbacks go, but I mean the Texans are now under pressure, and I think I don't think the head coach may necessarily wanted to start his clock, but you start your clock once you draft a quarterback. What are your thoughts about them not being in on any of these quarterbacks? And then just being able to just like have you kind of just staying true to what they wanted to do in the first round. They had their list of players, and they were not gonna they're not gonna go out and go get a Jalen Carter or go pay high for one of these quarterbacks.
Yeah, I agree with it. I had Bryce Young number 1. I thought he was QB1. I would have been in on CJ Stroud. I don't know if they were in or not if he would have got down to 5. There's varying reports on that, but obviously he went number 2, so it doesn't matter at that point. And the fact that they had the group of 4 guys they were comfortable with, and they held firm, and they got one of those 4 guys. Now we'll never know what order they had those 4 in, but I do think the scary part of what came out in that article is they did discuss trading down, and then they would have taken an offensive lineman at 12. It would have been a reach at that point, and then Raider Nation probably would have lost a little bit. It didn't sound like, I don't remember off the top of my head, but it wasn't like it was a haul of draft picks coming back to them to go from 7 to 12. Yeah. I think it was like a second round pick, maybe a pick swap later in the draft. So it wasn't a ton of compensation. I just had flashbacks to the Raiders trading from 3 to 12 to take DJ Hayden, and all they got back was that second round pick that year. But luckily, the football gods intervened. Tyree Wilson was available. But I do like that the Raiders did have a strategy. These are the guys we want. If this happens, they had a bunch of contingencies. Every team does. So let's not act like this is just a Raiders thing. And because they did it, but they were ready to pivot. We could disagree. I don't think Peter King should have given the name of the player. If I'm going to let a reporter into the draft,
exactly.
But don't start giving out like trade secrets like that nationally to where everyone has access to read them. But overall, I think that they got the guy that they wanted at that point, that fits the best for their defense, but he's also a productive football player with upside. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. And I'm a big believer, and I've always said that since we started, having these shows. Like if you're taking to the top 10, it's quarterback, left tackle, corner, or pass rusher. That's it.
Yeah, that's
You have
it.
to take one of those 4 guys in the top 10. And you see, like, look back at the draft, what was it, 2000, I think it was 20 or 19 or 20, where all those fifth-year options just came up. I think only 12 guys
Yeah.
their fifth-year option picked up. The price to pick up a fifth-year option on a linebacker is like $20 million. It's absurd. So I wouldn't take one, because, and short of that guy being like a 2 or 3-time Pro Bowler by the time he hits free agency, I'm not paying him $20 million. So you take the players at the position where the cost meets the opportunity. And when you're thinking down the line, is this guy a long-term piece? Am I going to pay him in that 5th year if everything works out? There's only a few positions out there I would do that, based on what it costs to retain these guys. Offensive line is, I'm pretty sure there's not a delineation between positions, so it's just offensive line. So you're basically playing, you know, middle to higher end tackle money if you're going to take a guard or a center in the first round, that 5th-year option. Like, I wouldn't do that either.
Yeah.
I would find that guy in free agency or in the 2nd or 3rd round. So they stuck to their board and they got a pass rusher. Can't complain. Love the pick.
Yeah, no question about it. I do think so. 2 questions real quick. One was, it seems like everybody in the AFC went out and got their quarterback. Is that is obviously the most important position in all sports. Should we feel distraught the fact that the Raiders, I mean, Jimmy G is obviously not the full long-term answer. Them cheering about a quarterback not falling kind of like makes me feel like they have a little bit more of a interest in making him a little bit more of a long-term answer, which I'm not great on, but I mean, he knows system, winner, all the stuff like that. What are your thoughts about that? That, you know, you look all through the AFC, and especially with Rodgers going to New York, that the AFC is everybody settled on their quarterback, and the Raiders are still not.
It's a tough position to be in, and it's something that we've talked about. It's being in the middle. If you're in the
Yes.
middle, um, it's a tough position to be from an upgrade standpoint, and it's a tough position to be trying to compete with the upper echelon, because that's where you ultimately have to get to. Um, Jimmy G is a middle of the road quarterback. He's somewhere in that 15 range. Probably just below where Derek Carr was. I mean, they're probably kind of in the same bucket or right next to each other, one
Uh-huh.
bucket apart. So it's not an upgrade. It's not a downgrade necessarily, but that means the rest of the roster has to improve. And the issue you're going to run into is everyone else has an elite quarterback,
Improved.
or soon to be elite quarterback, and
Uh-huh.
you don't. Now, you can look at it one way and say, okay, going into the next draft, you're supposed to be good quarterbacks. We'll have an opportunity. But if you flip the page and look at the NFC, there's no quarterbacks over there. It's a wasteland.
Yeah.
They're all in the AFC. So you're battling all those NFC teams next year to get your hands on 1 or 2 quarterbacks. And the only way to do that, unfortunately, is to finish with one of the 2 or 3 worst records, which the Raiders won't, because barring anything drastic happening to Jimmy G or Devontae Adams or Max Crosby, this team's probably still going to be somewhat competitive. Um,
Win
you know,
7 games.
if you look in the crystal ball, like, you can make an argument they can fight for a wild card spot, but clearly in the division they're in, based on where the roster is today on May 10th, they're probably in that 3rd to 4th spot at best. They're not one of the 2 best rosters in the AFC West.
Yeah.
Now, the games still have to be played. The injuries happen. You still got to line up and play 17 games and see where the chips may fall. But if you're just looking at the rosters from top to bottom, the Raiders don't have a playoff roster as we head into 2023.
Yeah, I totally agree. Foster Moreau signs with the Saints. The Ruggs saga ends as he gets sentenced as well. So that there. Last thing before we go, let's everybody's talking about Patrick Queen, Isaiah Simmons, and they want to trade Renfro for some kind of package to do that. How do you think that would work? Would you want Patrick Queen, or Isaiah Simmons? I mean, they obviously don't want to go into this. Do we foresee them going into this season? I mean, we've been wrong before. Like we said last year, they can't possibly go into the season with this offensive line, and they did. Could they possibly go into this season with this linebacking core? I mean, that's the biggest kind of question here, because the only market left now for them to get improved there is for them to do it via trade.
As a fan, I would say yes, I'd want Patrick Queen, but seeing how this team is operated,
Nope.
I wouldn't trade any 2024 assets to fill that position now. Because they're looking long term. It's a rebuild. I know Raider fans don't want to hear that, but based on how they attack the draft and how they attack the offseason, they're rebuilding the core of this roster and the depth of this roster while trying to compete. But it's like they have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. They're not all in this year. So this they're looking down the line, and I might have been one of the first to say it in the middle of last year that I wouldn't be surprised that Mark Davis already told this front office that they were getting a couple of years, and that when they were 2-6 or 2-7, I was like, I don't think they're going to be gone after this year, let alone next year. So I wouldn't take Simmons either. I'm not a huge Isaiah Simmons guy. Like, it's a straight line speed athlete with stiff hips. It's not very good in space. Like, he's more of like a one directional player. Like, he's not going to break down, get in and out of cuts. Like, it looks good when he's running in a straight line, but like you need to be able to, as a linebacker, to cut and do different things. Like, you'd have to get creative defensively to take advantage of the type of athlete he is, but I don't think this is the right scheme to do that in. I'm not paying him what it's going to cost, and I don't want to give up draft picks for him. But if the cost for Patrick Queen was reasonable, and when I say reasonable, like a 4th or 5th round pick, then yes. If it's a top 3 round pick, then no, because you don't know what the outcome of this season is going to be. And I don't think adding that one linebacker is going to change this from a 7 or 8 win team to an 11 or 12 win team. It's not going to make that big of a difference. So I think you continue to develop Divine Diablo and hope that you hit there. We didn't get a ton of him last year due to the injury.
Yeah.
And another year in the system. Now, remember, when he was playing, they were playing a lot of zone early in the season, and that's not what he's good at. He needs to be a man-to-man coverage linebacker, and the Raiders kind of went to more man-to-man as the season progressed. So we'll see. I think it's probably, and I know Raider fans, say I'm getting a little whiny lately, but it's one of the 2 or 3 worst linebacker cores of football. If you just look at the pure off-the-ball linebackers. Now, if you want to throw Crosby, Wilson, and Jones and tell me they're linebackers, fine. But if we're just looking at the pure middle linebackers in the 3-4, the 2 guys are going to be on the field in the nickel. It's not a good unit.
Yeah, it's bad. It's one of the worst worst in the history of the franchise. And I'll just say, I'll be whiny and say that too as well. We don't. I mean, Mother's Day's around the corner. You can be happy on Mother's Day, but like, I mean, as far as our linebacker core, I can't sit there and say they're going to be, they're really good. You mentioned the Raiders will be. Like, the Raiders are on rebuild mode. The Raiders are going to, like, he told him he's giving him a couple years. What would the record have to be for them to not to happen? Because I mean, because it would have to be, if the Raiders are in, I've kind of thought in my head, like, if the Raiders are in Drake May or Caleb Williams territory in next year's draft, is Ziegler making that pick?
I would say the only way that they wouldn't. So I'm 90-10 that they're getting another year.
Yeah.
The only way they wouldn't is if somehow Jimmy Garoppolo, Max Crosby, and Devontae Adams are healthy and play 17 games, and this team wins 2 or 3 games. If that happens, I think they're in trouble. Yeah. But if those guys get hurt, the team wins 3 or 4 games with Aiden O'Connell or Brian Hoyer, then they get a pass from ownership, not from us as fans, but from ownership. However, if this roster stays fairly healthy and they're not hit by a disastrous run of injuries and they still can't win more than 3 or 4 games, they may be in trouble.
Yeah.
But I would say, as of today, 90% chance that they are going to get another full draft in another year after this.
Yeah, it just seemed like they're going to be bad, but not bad enough. But it's early, Raider Nation. It's early, Raider Nation. We'll see what happens.
It's not prediction time. We haven't seen the schedule. That's tomorrow.
we have not. Grade for the draft, and then we'll get out of here. Grade for the draft.
I give it a B overall because I do think that you do get 2 impact players in Wilson and Mayer. You do get guys that have a chance to develop into starters, whether Young's a starter this year or next, whether Bennett's a starter this year or next. But at the end of the day, they're probably going to come out of this in the next 2 to 3 years with 4 or 5 starters, which you can't really get mad at that, especially with the top 2 guys have a chance to be, Pro Bowl type level players at their positions. I just don't like the fact of the 2 trade ups, the player that they taking Tucker at 100 and not waiting to 109, trading up to get O'Connell. I think losing those 5th, 6th, 7th round picks, whatever they gave up to do those trades for players that probably aren't going to make much of an impact this year, keep me from saying A- or B+.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit harsher. I'm going to go only because I don't know what the foot injury is. If I didn't have the foot injury, I'd be right there with a B-. I'm going to go C+ because if the foot injury is something that continuously bothers Tyree Wilson, and people are gonna hate me for this pick for this grade, but that's fine. I don't care. But I'm just worried about the injury, and that scares the hell out of me that we've had we have some play. Liz Frank can be a pain. Darren McFadden, it could be a pain. It can be even for the most talented of player, that can be one of the most annoying injuries to deal with. So that's where everything generates from his feet. So like, hopefully that's not the case for the Raiders. I'm not wishing for that. I'm just saying that I wish if that was not in the equation, I would definitely give him a B minus in this draft because of the questionable stuff in the middle of the draft. The Tucker thing just kind of bothers me. All right, Ray Nation. Ryan is about to take a flight again in about 5 minutes, probably.
I'm in an Uber right now. What are you talking about?
Exactly. Your thing is stable. It's very stable Uber. You got a good setup in there.
Yeah, I got a mount in the back seat.
On the back seat. So, all right, Ray Nation. We'll talk to you next time, and thank you for watching the show. We'll check you out. Let's go, Ray Nation.
Take care.
Take care.